The house on Alderwood Lane was supposed to be a new beginning. A modest craftsman tucked away at the edge of Hidden Ridge, it stood as a quiet refuge after the chaos of loss. My wife had passed the year before, and my adult son, Marcus, had just joined the police force. With my heart bruised and my future uncertain, I imagined this house as a balm, a sanctuary where I could piece my life back together. Then I met Katen. Katen Larimore was the president of the Hidden Ridge Homeowners Association. She was the type of woman who smiled like a switchblade and wielded her authority like a guillotine. Tall, lean, and perpetually dressed in pastel sweater sets, she carried a clipboard as though it were an extension of her spine, straight, rigid, immovable. Her every step across the trimmed lawns and paved sidewalks of Hidden Ridge felt like a decree. My first interaction with her came 3 days after I moved in. She introduced herself with a folder of HOA rules and a warning. "We value cohesion here," she said, as if welcoming me to a cult. "Your lawn is the face of the neighborhood. First impressions matter." At the time, I brushed it off. I was a newcomer. Maybe she was just passionate. But within a month, that hope wilted like untended roses. The first citation was for leaving my trash bin on the curb an hour past pickup. The second came when I planted tulips that didn't conform to the HOA's approved flora list. Then came the fine for a flagpole I installed, a modest metal rod with an American flag flapping quietly above my porch. "Flags over 3 feet disrupt the visual unity," Katen said at the next HOA meeting. "You'll need to remove it or pay the $150 noncompliance fee." Her voice, though soft, carried the weight of iron, and every other board member nodded along, as if enchanted by her spell. I tried reasoning with her. I even attended 2 consecutive meetings, thinking logic and patience might melt the frost around her clipboard. But Katen wasn't governing. She was ruling. With her inner circle of sycophants, people who seemed more interested in power than community, she issued decrees, penalties, and warnings with surgical cruelty. But the final insult came wrapped in sunlight and good intentions: a solar panel. I had it installed one afternoon. It wasn't large, just a compact, efficient unit designed to power the home's lights and water heater. Quiet, clean, forward-thinking. But the very next morning, I found a notice taped to my front door. Violation: installation of non-conforming exterior equipment. Fine: $600. I stared at the paper in disbelief. The fine wasn't just absurd, it was illegal. State laws permitted solar panels in residential areas, and the HOA had no jurisdiction to override them. I filed a formal objection. Sent letters. Hired a lawyer to craft a carefully worded appeal. Katen responded with a smile and a shrug. "Our guidelines are about preserving the aesthetic integrity of the neighborhood. You can take it up with the board." But the board was Katen. Frustration burned in my chest, and I felt like I was suffocating inside my own home. Each trip to the mailbox brought dread. Each knock on the door echoed like a summons. It was no longer a home, it was a trap. Then, one late night fueled by insomnia and desperation, I dove into the HOA's founding documents. I read every bylaw, every amendment, every footnote. Buried deep in the original charter, I found it a loophole. According to Section 12, homeowners on boundary lots, those adjacent to unmaintained communal land, could withdraw from the HOA if the green space behind their property had gone neglected for over 12 consecutive months. I walked out back and stared at the plot behind my fence, a dried-out retention pond littered with beer cans, overgrown brush, and one rusting shopping cart. A wasteland. And, crucially, untouched by HOA maintenance for years. I documented everything. Took photos. Cross-referenced maintenance schedules. Spoke with neighbors who confirmed the space had been ignored for at least 3 years. With the help of my lawyer, I drafted a withdrawal request. I filed it. I made it official. And I was free. Or so I thought. 3 days later, I received a letter. Then another. Each one filled with increasingly aggressive language, threatening, escalating legal consequences if I didn't rescind my withdrawal. I didn't respond. That's when the pettiness began. The lawn service stopped mowing my grass without notice. A neighbor accused me of letting my dog bark all night, even though I don't own a dog. Someone left an anonymous complaint about blinding window glare from my newly cleaned windows. Then came the day I found Katen herself on my porch, clipboard clutched like a holy text. "You're endangering the community's harmony," she said. "This is bigger than you." I stepped outside and closed the door behind me. "I followed your rules. I played by your game. And now I'm out. You don't get to control me anymore." Her smile cracked. "We'll see about that." I watched her retreat down the sidewalk like a retreating general. She was already plotting her next move. I didn't know then just how far she was willing to go. But the next chapter of our quiet war would be anything but silent. Retaliation arrived not with thunder, but with calculated silence. No official notices this time, just little transgressions, surgical and precise. My hedges, once trimmed with professional care, grew wild. When I inquired with the landscaping company, they informed me I was no longer on the list. The HOA had removed me. Fine. I bought my own trimmer. Then came the sprinkler sabotage. One morning, I found my front yard flooded. The valve had been tampered with. My home insurance flagged it as possible vandalism, but there was no proof. No prints. No witnesses. Only the creeping suspicion of a woman in a pastel sweater with too much time and too little conscience. The crescendo came in whispers. Anonymous complaints filed to the city about my porch light, my car's erratic parking patterns, and the chemical smell from my garage, none of which were true. Each time, city officials came by, dutifully performed their inspections, and left with weary apologies. "You've got someone targeting you," one said. "We see this kind of thing more than we'd like." I didn't need to guess who it was. Karen had traded fines for warfare by attrition. So, I documented everything. I installed additional cameras, discreet but high definition. I built a paper trail. I filed a harassment complaint with a local police department, but it went nowhere. The evidence was circumstantial. "We can't pursue this unless something more concrete happens," the officer said. I looked at him. "It will." Then I called Marcus. He had just started his new role in a neighboring city's precinct. Hearing the weariness in my voice, he drove over that same evening. We sat on the porch, beer in hand, the porch light humming above us. "She's going to push until something breaks," I said. Marcus stared out at the street, eyes narrowing. "Let her. But document everything. Let her write her own report. You just keep the camera rolling." I nodded. It was a good plan. Simple. Tactical. The best revenge would be indifference, backed by evidence. Karen must have sensed the shift. For a week, things were quiet. Then I made the decision to move out temporarily, just to clear my head. Marcus had space at his place, and the idea of escaping the HOA circus, even briefly, felt like fresh oxygen. I began packing. One box at a time. Neatly labeled. Dishes, linens, books. 2 days before the move, I found a note taped to my garage. "Improper moving practices. HOA protocol requires 7 days notice. Violators may be subject to inspection." I almost laughed. I had withdrawn from the HOA. None of it applied. But Karen wasn't enforcing policy. She was flailing. Then, on a warm Thursday afternoon, I was in the garage, boxing up tools, when I saw the black SUV pull up. 2 police officers stepped out. 2 police officers stepped out of the SUV and adjusted their belts like they were preparing for something complicated. I set the wrench down and wiped my hands on an old rag, instinctively wary. They walked up the driveway in sync, mirrored expressions of polite suspicion. "Mr. Hartman?" the older one asked. He had a clipboard, the irony not lost on me. "Yes. We received a report of illegal activity on the premises," he said, looking at the garage. "Are you in the process of moving without proper authorization from the homeowners association?" I raised an eyebrow. "You're telling me someone called the police over moving boxes?" The younger officer glanced at my organized rows of sealed cartons, clearly unthreatening. "We're just following up, sir. Standard procedure when a call is made." "Do you know who made the call?" I asked. "Anonymous. the older officer said, lips tightening in a tell that all but confirmed what I already knew. I handed him a copy of my withdrawal documents and the original HOA clause that supported it. This is legal. I'm not part of the HOA anymore. She doesn't have jurisdiction. He skimmed it, then nodded. Looks legitimate. We'll file a false report notice for our records. Sorry for the trouble. I nodded and watched them leave. But the wheels of my mind were turning now. Karen had crossed a line. Harassment was one thing, but falsely involving law enforcement? That was a new level of madness. Marcus arrived that evening after hearing about the incident. His posture was tense, the calm authority of a cop coiled under the surface. She called the police on you for moving out? He asked, standing with arms crossed in the doorway. She's losing her grip, I said. She's testing boundaries to see what she can get away with. Marcus shook his head. That's criminal misuse of emergency services. She's playing a dangerous game. The next morning, the footage from my driveway camera confirmed what we suspected. Karen had stood at the edge of my property with her phone, clearly speaking into it while staring at my garage. She had made the call herself. I copied the footage and submitted it with a formal complaint to the police. They opened an investigation. Not yet an arrest, but a crucial paper trail had begun. That week, Marcus and I moved the remaining boxes in one day. We were fast, efficient, quiet. But Karen wasn't done. 2 days after I left, my mailbox at the house filled with violation notices. Even though I no longer lived there. Even though I was legally separated from the HOA. Violation. Unkempt weeds. Violation. Excessive dust on window panes. Violation. Neglect of community spirit. That last one wasn't even a real infraction. It was her frustration scribbled on paper, weaponized through bureaucracy. I returned one afternoon to mow the lawn and clear the place out, and there she was, standing across the street with a smug expression and her clipboard like a sword. You're not above the rules, she called out. I'm not under them either, I replied calmly. Her eyes narrowed. You'll regret testing me. That threat lingered in the air long after she disappeared down the street. She wanted a reaction. She thrived on confrontation. But I wouldn't give it to her. I'd give her something far worse, consequences. With Marcus's guidance, I pursued a restraining order based on the accumulation of harassment, false reporting, and trespassing. He couldn't be directly involved because of conflict of interest, but he made sure I understood every option. Meanwhile, things in Hidden Ridge started to shift. Word spread about Katen's vendetta. A few neighbors once loyal to her quietly reached out. One man, Derek, confided that Karen had fined him $250 for a holiday wreath left up past season, even though it was still December. Another woman named Rosa admitted that she'd once voted against a proposal Karen supported and woke up the next week to find HOA inspectors measuring her shutters. The picture of Katen's reign was coming into focus, and it wasn't pretty. We compiled testimonies. Quietly, strategically. Rosa sent a video of Karen yelling at a teen who had parked his car, too crooked. Derek forwarded an audio recording from a board meeting where Karen laughed off a motion to allow residents to vote on fine appeals. By the time we finished, we had a folder thick with evidence: harassment, overreach, threats, and abuse of power. And then, like a match to dry leaves, everything ignited. I returned to the house one final time to gather mail and check on the lawn. As I stepped out of the car, 2 more police cruisers rolled into the cul-de-sac. I stood still, heart thudding. Then, to my disbelief, the officers walked toward me. Mr. Hartman, we need to speak with you, the lead officer said. My palms went cold. What is this about? We've received a report of squatting, he replied. You've been accused of illegally re-entering a property from which you've been evicted. Evicted? I pulled out my ID and proof of ownership. This is my property. I've never been evicted. I moved out voluntarily. He examined the paperwork, then looked visibly annoyed. Who reported this? I didn't answer. We both already knew. It was the final straw. This wasn't just pettiness. It was malicious abuse of the legal system. I called Marcus. He listened silently, then said, Dad, I'm coming over. Don't say another word to anyone until I get there. As I waited, I looked across the street. Karen was watching from her front window, a glass of white wine in hand. She thought she had won, but she had just made the mistake of her life. Marcus arrived 10 minutes later, his police cruiser easing to a stop beside the other patrol cars like the final piece in a trap. He stepped out with calm precision. Uniform crisp, face unreadable. The two officers already on the scene turned to him instinctively, recognizing his badge and posture. "You the responding officer's son?" one asked. Marcus nodded, pulled me aside, and spoke quietly. "You good?" "I'm fine," I said. She told him I was squatting. Said I'd been evicted. His jaw tensed. "That's criminal." Then he stepped forward and addressed the officers. "I've got verified ownership documentation from the homeowner, video evidence of malicious false reporting, and an ongoing civil harassment case. This isn't a squatting situation. This is targeted abuse." One officer sighed and lowered his notepad. "We figured something was off. She's persistent." "Persistent doesn't cover it," Marcus muttered. I followed him across the street. Karen had retreated inside, but her blinds twitched slightly. Marcus knocked. The door opened seconds later. Her smile was automatic, smug, rehearsed, until she saw his badge. "Good afternoon, Ms. Larimore," Marcus said smoothly. "We need to talk." She blinked. "Oh, of course, officer. How can I help you?" "I'm here regarding a false police report you made against my father, Mr. Hartman." Her face dropped like a curtain. That's not a false report. He doesn't live here anymore. He's been removed from the HOA. Living outside the HOA doesn't void someone's right to enter or maintain their property, Marcus said. Especially not when they still legally own it. "But he's disrupting the neighborhood," she said, voice raising. "He thinks he's above order. He mocks our systems." "Our systems," Marcus repeated, unimpressed. "Ma'am, did you call the police and claim he was squatting?" She folded her arms. "I made a safety call. You claimed he was trespassing in a home he owns." Silence. "That's a false report," Marcus continued. "Combined with the footage of your previous call and the ongoing harassment complaints, I'm afraid we have probable cause for an arrest." Karen stepped back. "Wait, what?" "You have the right to remain silent," Marcus said, reaching calmly for the cuffs. "Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." "No. You can't do this. I'm the president of this neighborhood." "You were," Marcus said. "But not anymore." As he cuffed her hands behind her back, neighbors began to gather. Some watched from porches, others from windows, and a few from the street. Rosa was there, eyes wide, hand over her mouth. Derek stepped closer, recording discreetly with his phone. Karen twisted in Marcus's grip, trying to appeal to the officers, to the crowd, to anyone. "He's ruining everything. He's poisoning the community." But no one came to her defense. As Marcus placed her in the back of his cruiser, a strange silence settled over Hidden Ridge. The kind of silence that follows a thunderclap. The calm after a storm has finally broken. It took 2 weeks for the official fallout to begin. The HOA board, under pressure from residents and now under legal scrutiny, convened an emergency vote. Karen was removed from her position. An interim president, Rosa, was appointed. I attended the next meeting not as an outsider, but as a guest of honor. "We owe you an apology," Rosa said at the podium, "for letting things go on as long as they did. For being afraid." "I understand," I said. "Fear's powerful, but truth is stronger, once you shine a light on it." The crowd applauded. Not loud, but sincere. That was enough. Karen eventually posted bail. But her name was a whisper now, a ghost in the cul-de-sac. She stayed indoors, avoided eye contact, walked her dog early in the morning when no one else was around. Her kingdom was gone, and the residents she once ruled had no interest in restoring her crown. As for me, I finished moving out. The house was listed a month later and sold to a kind young couple who wanted a quiet life near good schools. I left them with a folder, part welcome packet, part warning, and a note that read, "Don't let anyone tell you this isn't your home." Marcus came by the day I handed over the keys. We stood in the empty kitchen, echoing memories and cardboard outlines on the floor. "She won't try anything again," he said. "I know," I replied. "She picked the wrong guy." "No," I said, locking the door one last time. "She picked the wrong son." As we drove away, I glanced back at Hidden Ridge in the rearview mirror. The lawns were still perfect, the sidewalks still swept, but the air felt lighter, like a place that had finally remembered what it meant to be a neighborhood, not a kingdom. The story wasn't about revenge. It was about boundaries, courage, and the quiet power of standing your ground. And in the end, it wasn't Katen's clipboard or rules that won. It was truth. And truth, backed by a badge, spoke louder than fear ever could.